What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 15 of the Speak Up Sports Podcast with Cass, Chris, and Shad. Big week. What's going on, fellas?
Terrible week, bro. Both my teams, terrible.
Yeah,
that is right. Both your teams did
bad
sell.
week for me.
As you mentioned, both your teams sold. One being the Celtics in the in-season tournament. The second being the Eagles in a big regular season game. Probably one of the biggest regular season games we've had this season, with the 49ers going against the Eagles in the link.
Statement.
Lot of shit talking before, and a big statement win for the 49ers. But, as we usually do, we get started with the weekly review, so we can go ahead and start there. The biggest game of the week, the 49ers versus the Eagles. The 49ers won 42-19 in Philly. Brock Purdy had 314 yards, 4 touchdowns. Debo stood on business. 3 touchdowns, four receptions, 116 yards.
Man, that's a new slant boy, man. Fuck that.
That's the new slant boy. What do you guys think of the game, man?
Go ahead, Chris. Say your piece.
Look, man. Honestly, I knew we was about to lose the game when we literally went down the field 2 times in a row and came away with field goals. You cannot beat a good team, coming away with field goals. Once we did that and they scored the one time to get ahead, I was like, yeah, it ain't looking good right now.
And for our audience, that's to start the game. They started off the first 2 drives. Went down, went up 6-0.
We went down, got a field goal, made them 3 and out. Went down, got another field goal. They 3 and out again, and then at that point, it was just a snowball effect after that. I mean, you can't.
Floodgates open.
They just open wide open, man. I'm just saying, we couldn't do shit. I mean, at halftime, we was lucky to only be down 14-6, but they came with the more intensity. I came in front, came alive about it. They came to set a statement. I mean, they truly did. They showed it.
And it wasn't only
class.
It wasn't just the guys.
I still don't agree with the whole. Stephen A had a take saying that this delegitimized last year. We're not the same team from last year. We don't have the same coordinators from last year. We lost a good bit of our defense in general, but I don't agree with that. Just like us beating Kansas City, I don't agree. That don't avenge us from losing the Super Bowl. They still got the ring. That don't matter. But we're going to talk about it later, but I'm just looking forward to us, pushing through and going on to the next week because that shit was ass.
And that's really all you can do is kind of flush that and move on to the next week. But Cass, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had those same feelings. We knew they had to score touchdowns, and it was just a matter of time before San Francisco got right, because that's what we've seen the last couple of weeks from them. They did go through that skid, but they got right once they got healthy. And as you've seen, like, they scored on every possession they had pretty much in the second quarter on. So I mean, you can't fight field goals and touchdowns. So I mean, that's what it really came down to. Defense couldn't get stops, and offense couldn't execute what they wanted to do. I mean, it wasn't terrible. Like, they still had a chance to win throughout, even parts of the third quarter, but they just couldn't find that rhythm. And I mean, I attribute most of this to them also having that 10 day break, compared to the Eagles, who we said have been in that gauntlet. Like, this is a team that I afford that excuse to a little bit, I guess you could say.
And before you go, Shy, I do feel like, personally speaking, San Francisco seemed like they wanted it more, to be honest. They had a point to prove. Not to say that it made a difference, but I really do believe that, they came with a statement. They made a statement like, nah, we would have really won the game. Y'all really didn't win the game. And from there, it just felt like they had something to prove. And we was like, well, whatever. We just walking through it like a regular football game.
Yeah.
And an underrated storyline that wasn't talked about too much is also the fact that Hargrave is over there, coming from the Eagles last year, and then also somebody that kind of made an impact in the game, and they all came in and they're all black to the link as well. Chase Young coming over there, that's he made a difference in the game. He that's somebody that they expected to come help. And expected to help them take them over the edge. So that was a good sight to see for them. But what do you guys think about the narrative? Today they had the picture that went viral of the Eagles fans standing outside, the Eagles practice facility talking about running the ball. What do you guys think about that? DeAndre Swift ended up having 6 carries for 13 yards. Jalen Hurts ended up being the leading rusher with 7 carries for 20 yards. Do you think that, and it does seem like the Eagles have had a few games where they don't necessarily consistently, stick with the run. Maybe that's a little bit due to how getting behind in some of these games. They switch running backs so often. Maybe it's hard to get in a rhythm in the run game. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, me personally, I get it. I get it from both sides. The argument is why run the ball when you got Devontae Smith and AJ, who you expect to win your one-on-one matchups. But again, he had 4 carries in the first half and then 2 the rest of the game. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's not. I mean, I'm not to say he's Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, the top echelons of the backs. But I mean, you still got to give some burn to the running backs, even if you saying, "Oh, we're not hitting the big plays 3-4 yards." Okay, but you got to keep doing that and make. I mean, once the 49ers know you're not running the ball, that makes it much more easier. Like, we could dedicate more people to in the passing lanes to keep you from getting the big shot, getting the big game. But if you decide I don't want to run the ball, I mean, you kind of setting yourself up to teams that are that level of 49ers. You could do that against the lower level teams. You could say, okay, we're just gonna pass the ball all game, whatever. You just gonna have to stop us, and you're not gonna do it. But against teams like them, you can't do that. I mean, you seen it in the Buffalo game, Chiefs game. As soon as the second half came, we started running the ball. Offense started picking up. Defense is like, okay, now we got to respect the run. Okay, here you go with the pass. They do that too much for my liking. I'm not saying run the ball 25 times a game, but 4 carries in the first
Definitely
At
half.
least like keep
get
them
a little bit
honest.
more balance.
Yeah, I mean that's how I feel about it too. You got to keep them honest, even if you're just getting those 3-4 yard chunks, because we know once the end of the game comes, those turn into 5-6 yards, and that really like messes up the defense, gets them tired. But yeah, and that also messes with their rhythm. So I agree with that. They should have ran the ball more, but they know that. You know what I mean? So it's tough,
And
but
and I feel like recently they've been in a lot of third and longs, especially for a team that third and short is damn near automatic for them. It definitely would be a good sight to see get their offense back on track. Not to say that their offense has been bad, but their offense definitely hasn't been consistent down to down. So to get the offense back on track consistently, that would be something to see and something to look forward to as they play Dallas in this upcoming week.
I mean,
But
and then
looking
not to
ahead to go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna say about the keeping it balanced, because I mean the last few games we literally come out on first down. Like the first drive we throwing it. Everybody knows that. It's like, okay, switch it up a little bit. It's just like the same people who argue why you run every first down if you ain't going nowhere. But I'm just like, they know you're throwing the ball. They know what you about to do. But that's I
And that's
expect them
one
to
thing
switch
about
it up.
having a new OC, a rookie OC, and his first time being a play caller. But like as I mentioned, looking ahead to the game versus Dallas, we can look at the Thursday night game for Dallas versus Seattle. Dallas ended up pulling out an exciting game, a big high scoring game that we probably thought would have the Eagles 49ers game would have looked like 42 or 41-35. I mean, Geno was excellent. He had 334 yards, 3 touchdowns. In the first half, he was picking him and DK Metcalf were picking on Deron Bland, and right on cue, Deron Bland made a big play in the second half, getting an interception on Geno, and then Dak turned up. I mean, we talked a little bit about Dak being in the MVP conversation and how we felt on that, but getting his first win against a team that was at that point in time a winning team. He goes for 299 yards and 3 touchdowns. What did you guys think of the game?
I kind of think like what you just said. You would have thought that would have been the Eagles 49er game. I honestly didn't think Seattle, stood a chance. But Geno showed me something. And
Mm-hmm.
also, Dak did too. I mean, they didn't punt at all throughout the
Mm-hmm.
game. So, I mean, they were going up and down the field. I mean, the defense did not have it that day. And Dak, showed like, hey, if defense don't have it, I could come away with something. I could carry out a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
it still was some, miscues or Seattle. Seattle should have won that game, honestly. But shouts out to the Cowboys. They made the plays to win the game. Michael Parsons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with that same thing. It was a great game to watch as a fan. Honestly, we've seen kind of CD step up. These last few weeks, he's had some big games for him, and that connection with Dak is growing stronger and stronger. The targets are shooting up, so you can tell that he's making an effort to get it to CD, and he's producing. On the Seahawks side, they honestly needed that game, man. It's they had a chance to still you know, win the division a couple weeks ago, and you kind of see that slip out of their hands now. Now they're fighting for, one of the wild card spots, but they still showed you that they are a team, that can be legit, but it's still a rough road ahead for them. They still got to pick up wins, you know what I mean? Because it's
They got the 49ers this week and the Eagles the following week. And
yeah.
one of the things that you mentioned with them fighting for the wild card spot now is they lost twice to the Rams, who surprisingly are now, have made up ground and are now 6-6 and are in the playoffs currently and are ahead of Seattle. So they did need that game, and that was one of the reasons that I picked them in our weekly picks. But what a game, man! What a game!
Yeah, it was a hell
back
of a
and
game.
forth. They did end up making the critical mistake at the end when they didn't get that fourth down. But it ultimately led, kind of like I said last week, this was going to lead into the big conversation between Philly and the Dallas Cowboys. Who's going to win the division? Now that Philly has lost against the San Francisco 49ers, it might come down to who's going to get the 1 seed if Philly ends up losing this week. But another subplot in that's kind of underlying for both Dallas and Philly that also includes San Francisco is the MVP conversation. Because at the end of this week with Philly and Dallas going against each other, I mean, if Dallas wins, you can book it that the talking heads all next week are going to be like Dak MVP. It doesn't even matter if he has 100 yards and a touchdown. It's going to be Dak MVP, Dak MVP, Dak MVP. Probably the same situation for Jalen Hurts as well. With that being said, a lot of the conversation this week has been, Brock Purdy has moved into the favorite. How do you guys feel about the narrative that it's been a lot of the dink and dunk and the guys around him? Why isn't that a knock against him when you have Philly why is that the knock against him when you have Philly who has the best offensive line in the league? You also have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and then you have Dallas Goedert, who's coming back, who's a full participant this week or today. You got the Cowboys, who have one of the best offensive lines in the league. CeeDee Lamb. People are trying to say they don't have weapons now, but I didn't. Up until before the year started, I thought that Brandon Cooks was a weapon. Six straight years of 1,000 yards. Now all of a sudden he's not a weapon.
Yeah.
Tony Pollard, I said that I didn't believe in him as a bell cow, but everybody else was saying that he was one of the most explosive backs in the league. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think is what happened is, the Philly game kind of highlighted when you got Debo got 118 yards at the catch.
Yeah.
Majority of his yards came after the catch, so it's like, okay, all he doing is throwing screens, slant screens, little small digs, and you getting a lot of downfield blocking. That's the only knock against him. But I do agree, every team has weapons. I mean, all like you just said, Jalen Hurts has plenty of weapons. One of the best O lines, Devontae and AJ, and then you got Dak, who got a good O line too with CeeDee Lamb, like I said, Brandon Cooks, and I mean. Honestly, I don't knock it against Brock Purdy, but that is the narrative though. Especially, I'm just saying, this game alone highlight damn, y'all had over one person over 100-some yards at the catch. That's like, okay, he's making the play out there. He's taking off. He's doing what he need to do. But hey, Brock Purdy's still the engine to make it go though.
That's the thing, because you look at Tua. Come on now, I mean,
that was
weapons.
That was something I was going to bring up is, early in the season, it was 100. Now people were trying to say it's Tariq, but early in the season, it was Tua. People were saying nothing. Tua's MVP, Tua's this, that, and the third. So why is it now Brock Purdy is getting that hate? And I mean, it's basically the same offense or a similar offense. Obviously, the weapons are a little different, but
yeah.
And one of the things that I think was funny is I saw on Twitter, somebody was like, it's interesting that the narrative, a lot of people have said Christian McCaffrey should be MVP. Christian McCaffrey after we've gone through an entire summer where running backs were not important. That's been the narrative so far, was that running backs weren't that important. Now all of a sudden, it's Christian McCaffrey. He's the MVP. They said the same thing about the Colts and Jonathan Taylor, and then as soon as the Colts signed him, it's like, why did you sign him? He's a running back. It's silly. So it's funny to see the narrative kind of trying to take back from what Brock Purdy's doing. But at what point do we give him credit?
I think it also
4 touchdowns again.
It also had to do with just the narrative of he's Mr. Irrelevant. Like nobody wants to think that because if he was a first round draft pick, it wouldn't be no question. It'd be zero questions about what he doing. But because he was the last draft pick and nobody saw this coming, everybody's using that against him. Like, nah, he's going to eventually fall. This can't be him. He can't go nowhere else and do what he's doing. But I mean, he's doing it. But I think that's one of the other knocks on him is just he's not a top draft pick.
I just think it's funny that the knock against Dak, and this is my knock against Dak as well, is that, he's obviously putting up these great stats, but it's not coming against the great teams. Whereas Brock Purdy now, no disrespect to your Eagles, but he had 4 touchdowns against the Eagles, blowout. He had 3-4 touchdowns against the Cowboys, blowout. He had 3 touchdowns against the Jacksonville Jaguars, blowout. At what point do you damn, this boy is snapping? He hasn't thrown a pick yet against the team that we're talking about is championship contenders. So it's,
and what's also helping his case is what we talked about last episode, how none of the other quarterbacks in the league are just having a clean season, as we've seen this weekend, with Pat Mahomes, and just seeing how in crucial moments, they make those mistakes too, the same mistakes that Brock was making during that 3-game losing streak, which some of that could have been from injury too. So it's interesting. I think now is the time. You really got to look at this. They have a big division game coming up. You got to look at this and it's all right, it's coming down the stretch. We can't keep knocking this guy because of his weapons. He's still the quarterback of this team. He's still, like you said, the engine. He's making it go. He really is. And his teammates are rallying around him. That's what you want to see. So I think that's the definition of it. Man, he's winning these big games and they're blowing him out. But it's San Francisco, man.
I think it's still gonna be tight. I think the defining moment is gonna be when they play the Ravens.
It's gonna be interesting.
It's gonna come down to that game, in my opinion. Because, like you said, Shai, even if he do great this weekend against Seattle, whoever comes out on top against Philly and Dallas, that's who's going to be the next person that's going to be okay, he established himself as MVP.
And Jalen Hurts probably is going to be the best. If they win, he's probably going to be the biggest beneficiary because the Eagles don't have that tough of a schedule to end the season. So you would think, let's not disrespect anybody in the league. You would think that a lot of these games are going to be pretty easy against the Giants and the Commanders.
Giants twice and
seems like the
Cardinals.
Commanders they play tough. Oh yeah, the Cardinals, not the Commanders, but it's we'll see. But he's got a good opportunity to kind of build on a win this week. But I'm glad that you went ahead and mentioned Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs had a tough loss. I was this close to picking the Packers.
You
were. You should have went.
I should have just went ahead because that's exactly what happened. Their defense played well the entire game. Patrick Mahomes only had 210 yards, 1 touchdown. He obviously had the big interception to Sky Moore on that what looked like a slot fade, and then Nixon ended up picking it off. Jordan Love, another 3-touchdown game, 267 yards. Dobbs played well. Christian Watson played well. The young receivers continue to play well. So what did you guys think of the game, man? Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, it was a big game for the Packers, man. You can see it from the jump. The first drive of the game, they came down and drove it down. It wasn't easy, but you can tell they were hitting everything they needed to hit. And that comes from the game plan, the coaching by Matt LaFleur. So it's like when you saw Kansas City, who has a good defense, this season, they've been playing great, but they got walked down. You know what I mean? It was like, wait a minute. They got whatever they wanted on that drive. And then it just kept going. When they got back to Pat, they couldn't score. They didn't score a touchdown to the end of the game, to the second half. They kicked 2 field goals in the first half. So it was like, all right, y'all got to score some touchdowns Like, it's your defense don't have it tonight. Y'all got to show up, and they just didn't. And we saw Pat Mahomes kind of make a big mistake at the end. I don't know that, like you mentioned, that little throw to Sky Moore, that was a little. I don't know what kind of miscommunication they had, but that was
Sky
big.
Moore slowed down a little bit, but the
Yeah,
quarterback played it well. I mean, he threw up a 50-50 ball.
Yeah, but that was a big moment in the game, big time in the game for them to make a good drive down the field, and they didn't. And Green Bay took hold of it, man. It was good to see. You know, of course, it was a little controversial at the end. You know, I know we'll talk about that, but you know, I think that had nothing to do with the actual game. It was controversial, but if they did get that pass interference call, I mean, we would have put them inside the 5-yard line.
It would,
with
but I feel
seconds.
like that was God telling them, yeah, y'all messed up, because they should not have gotten that personal foul. That's a 15-yard penalty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After a first down, that's a 15-yard penalty. He was not going out of bounds. No,
He was inbounds.
He was
and
inbounds.
you're fighting for yards. He's going towards the first down.
Exactly.
You got to hit this motherfucker to get him out of bounds.
I know the pass interference was way more egregious, but that was a makeup call.
I wouldn't even say it was that egregious. Honestly, I think you've seen I can't remember which ref it was, but he said it was the most egregious pass interference since the Saints.
I ain't saying all that.
That's a lot of BS.
That one was ridiculous. Yeah,
but
hey, that same he got closed. Like, that was
that was
like somebody
tough.
blinked, somebody's eyes closed on that. But
and it seems like the Saints have gone downhill ever since. But I mean you could have made the call. I think it was a little bit more bang bang than anything. But you know, Kansas City has gotten a lot of the calls recently. I mean, they got the call in the Super Bowl. They got the call. They get a lot of these calls. So
they got the call in. This is kind of the same call with in the AFC Championship when he was going out of bounds.
Exactly.
I didn't think he laid into him, but because he was technically out of bounds and you touched him, Patrick Mahomes penalty. But I like to give Jordan Love some love, man. I mean, I was skeptical of him coming in. I said what I said. I ain't like how he played, and he wasn't showing. He was doing good, like part of the games.
That wasn't consistent
at the beginning of the year. Yeah, he wasn't consistent, but he's growing into his own, and they gonna be right next year for real. And then, like you said, that defense is stepping up. That defense is playing solid all year, keeping them close in games, and if they keep it up, they could be a tough out, and if they make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think not enough has been said about the injuries that the offense has sustained this season and how that played a big part in the consistency. He didn't really have Christian Watson full tilt until this last game, honestly. Still doesn't. Now he's hurt again. Aaron Jones been in and out. They still, Bakhtiari out for the season. So, I mean, it's a lot of stuff that happened that you could kind of tell that's why they weren't consistent. They weren't able to get that groove. I mean, Christian Watson is their number one receiver. And you've seen that in this game on Sunday. Like, he can take over a game if he's right. But, I mean, it's unfortunate that he's hurt again. But
And right now, I mean, they are in the playoffs with a game upcoming on Monday night against the Giants. I mean, it's looking, as long as they don't sell, I mean, we can probably go ahead and pencil them in because they don't have a very tough schedule moving forward.
We could see around 3. Them in the Lions, round 3.
And exactly, and it'll be interesting for the Lions, honestly. It'll be interesting because, I mean, that's a tough team, especially for a young roster that has talent. They continue to get better, and then they do get into the playoffs. They don't got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And it's early in their development, whereas this is where you expect the Lions to be completely developed. But, I mean, outside of that, they got the Giants, Tampa Bay coming up, the Carolina Panthers. They have the Vikings who are fighting as well, and then they end the season with the Chicago Bears. So
that's light.
That's light.
That's light.
But we'll see. And much like the Minnesota Vikings, we saw another quarterback injury on Monday Night Football with the Cincinnati Bengals going against Jacksonville, and Cincinnati ended up pulling it out. A game that probably none of us expected them to win, 34-31 in overtime. We did see Trevor Lawrence go down. The news that we've heard since looks like a high ankle sprain, not as bad as it ended up looking like, but not even a game that I'm not 100% sure the Jacksonville Jaguars win with Trevor. At this point, the way that Jake Browning was playing, as Cass mentioned, 32 of 37, 354 yards passing, 1 touchdown.
Complete control of the game.
Probably would have played a lot better if it wasn't for some 2 dumbass receiver passes. What'd you guys think about the game?
I forgot all about that too just now. Like, what's that?
That shit was terrible.
What was that, Tyler Boyd? And he sat there and thought about it too. You can see he was like, I shouldn't throw this, and then he threw it. Like, what the fuck
Somebody said somewhere Jacoby Myers is smiling because at the last year,
a lot of heat off of him from that.
Yeah.
It was a big game by the Bengals. I don't think it really changes much with their season. I don't think they would have to win out, and I don't think that's going to happen for them. Jay Brown did look good though, and it kind of brings you back to like, should they have rested? Joe earlier in the season.
That boy.
Get this guy a little bit of run. If he's going to play like this, he's not going to play like this. Of course, they did have a little tougher schedule in the beginning of the season too. But like, you don't just come out here and do this and then just be completely trash, which was what Joe Burrow was the first beginning of the season, where they could have knocked off a couple of wins that they could have, they would have set them up in a better position. But I don't think it changed much for their season at this point. But it was a big win for them. So
especially because we saw him play last week, and he was not doing that against the Steelers. So it'll be interesting to see. And Jacksonville, I mean, they can lose. They can lose the division. I mean, they've got some tough games coming up. They still have to play the Ravens, and they're only a game ahead. Obviously, they beat Indy twice, but they're only a game ahead of Indy, and they're only a game ahead of the Texans, and they split with the Texans. So it could get real murky for him,
especially if he misses any time. If Trevor Lawrence does. But have we ever seen a season like this, or like so many injuries to these starting quarterbacks? Like, and Kenny Pickett is out too for probably the rest of the season. It's like, what the fuck is going on? This is the complete opposite of what they've been trying to do.
We really have. I feel like we see this happens more often than it doesn't, and it just doesn't seem like it because maybe not a lot of them are maybe season ending, or they happen as early as they did. It seemed like it was like back to back weeks, especially early on. But I mean, it's tough. It looked real bad when it first happened because I mean he stood up, went immediately back down, slammed his helmet. Was limping hard. It was.
That high ankle sprain a bitch though, so I get that. Even like high ankle sprain hurts.
Yeah, he probably not gonna be able to move too much if they do. If they do allow him to play, they're gonna try to keep him stationary as much as possible. But
which is against the Browns defense, a tough ass. So you might not even want to put him out there,
especially because your left tackle is now out for the rest of the season. So something to watch.
Yeah, for sure.
But that wraps us up for the weekly review. For the biggest games of the week, that also ended up being our primetime games of the week. That's one thing that we can be thankful for as compared to other weeks.